The riverbank was silent, except for the faint gurgle of water trickling over rocks. A soft splash upstream drew attention, where a large shape floated, motionless. At first, it seemed lifeless, but the ragged rise and fall of its chest revealed the lion, drenched and struggling, caught in the current. His tawny coat clung to him in sodden clumps, ears flattened, eyes wide with panic. Jamal, a local wildlife rescuer, stepped carefully onto the slippery mud. The lion's name was Amar, a young male separated from his pride. Jamal could see the exhaustion etched into every line of Amar's body, the way the water tugged at him like it wanted to swallow him whole. "Easy, Amar. I've got you," he whispered, his voice steady despite the fear pressing against his chest. The first attempt to reach the lion failed. The current was stronger than anticipated. Amar's paws thrashed, water churning white around him. Jamal's heart raced, yet he noticed the lion was too frightened to fight back aggressively. Instead, he shivered and whined softly, tilting his head toward Jamal as if pleading for help. Surveying the shallow riverbank, Jamal saw his shirt lying in the dirt. Acting quickly, he stripped it off and tied a rough knot in one end, creating an improvised lifeline. Slowly, he extended it toward Amar, the other end clenched tightly in his hand. The lion hesitated, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on the fabric. The tension was quiet but electric. The river's roar seemed to pause around them, holding its breath. Amar's paw tentatively grasped the shirt. Jamal gently pulled, inch by inch, guiding the lion toward the safer shallows. Each movement was measured, careful. The river still had teeth, and one wrong tug could send them both tumbling. Finally, with a final heave, Amar's paws found solid ground. He collapsed onto the mud, chest heaving, eyes gleaming with relief and trust. Jamal knelt beside him, letting his hand rest lightly on Amar's dripping fur. The lion remained still for a long moment, trembling, then nudged Jamal's shoulder with a soft, wet nose. A quiet bond had formed, not of domination, but of mutual acknowledgement. The wind ruffled the lion's fur as Jamal patted him once and stepped back. Amar rose shakily to his feet, shaking off the river's chill, ears twitching, tail slowly curling in a relaxed rhythm. The sun had begun its descent, scattering amber light across the water and glinting off Amar's wet mane. With a few last glances, Amar turned and loped back toward the cover of the forest. The shadows swallowed him gradually, leaving the riverbank empty but humming with the residue of the moment. Jamal remained for a while, breathing in the river's damp scent, feeling the weight of what had passed. No words were needed. The lion had survived, a fragile miracle achieved through quiet patience, respect, and a single piece of cloth. The forest settled into evening, the rustle of leaves and distant calls of wildlife the only accompaniment. Somewhere beyond the trees, Amar paused, looking back once before disappearing entirely, free, alive, and whole. The morning fog clung low to the grasslands, softening the edges of the dense forest beyond. A faint rustle broke the stillness. Amara, a lioness from the same pride Amar belonged to, lay hidden in a shallow hollow, her flanks rising and falling with effort. Something was different today. She moved cautiously, ears flicking, eyes wide and wary. Jamal had been tracking the pride since sunrise, noting that Amara had been unusually isolated. He approached slowly, careful to keep his presence unobtrusive. The lioness's breathing was heavy, punctuated by quiet whimpers that spoke of exhaustion, not fear. Her body was tense, yet the rhythmic sway of her tail hinted at something more, something impending. He crouched at a safe distance, whispering softly, "Steady, it's okay." The air smelled of damp earth and fresh dew, mixing with the musk of the lioness. Jamal could see the swell of her belly beneath the tawny coat, a subtle sign that life was soon to emerge. He watched as she shifted uneasily, one paw kneading at the ground as if preparing a hidden bed. Hours passed slowly, the forest alive with quiet murmurs of insects and distant bird calls. The lioness's breathing became more labored, and Jamal stayed close but invisible, knowing any sudden movement could frighten her. A soft moan escaped her throat, a low, instinctive sound. Then came the first tiny cries. A litter of cubs, fragile and wet, their coats still glistening from birth. Amara nudged them one by one, each touch gentle, deliberate. She cleaned them, her tongue moving in rhythmic, tender sweeps. The cubs mewed in response, the sound delicate and fleeting, carrying a promise of survival. Jamal allowed himself a quiet breath of relief, stepping back to give the mother her space. A subtle miracle unfolded. Despite the isolation and the exhaustion, Amara had guided her cubs into life with unwavering instinct. Jamal noted the way she paused, ears pricked to distant sounds, eyes scanning for threats, yet her movements remained soft and purposeful. Each motion was a lesson in trust and patience, a silent bond forming between mother and newborn. The sun broke through the mist, scattering golden light across the damp grass. The cubs nestled closer to Amara, their tiny bodies rising and falling in time with hers. Jamal watched in quiet reverence, feeling the weight of the morning's emotions, the hope, the fear, the fragile beauty of survival. Finally, satisfied her cubs were safe, Amara lifted her head and scanned the horizon. The pride was still distant, but she lay in quiet triumph, the forest around her alive with subtle whispers of life. Jamal remained unseen, carrying the memory of the morning with him, knowing some moments required nothing more than respect and patience to witness. The breeze shifted, brushing against Jamal's face, carrying with it the scent of new life. Somewhere deeper in the woods, Amar's roar echoed faintly, a gentle reminder that the pride was whole again, that the bond between man and wild was one of quiet understanding, not interference. The late afternoon sun turned the river golden, rippling across the water with a gentle shimmer. Amar padded along the shore, wet fur still clinging in streaks, when a sudden movement caught his eye. A small cluster of shapes stirred near the reeds, a family reunion waiting to unfold. Amara had moved closer to the river's edge with her cubs, each step cautious yet deliberate. The tiny ones stumbled occasionally on the slick grass, soft cries echoing across the bank. Amar paused, tail flicking, ears twitching, recognizing the scents that drifted on the breeze. His gaze softened as he took in the familiar figures of his mate and the newborns. Jamal watched from a distance, heart tightening with awe. The lion pride had begun to gather quietly in the clearing, each member maintaining a careful distance, curious yet respectful. There was no rush, no chaotic confrontation, only a series of measured steps and gentle nudges. Amar approached slowly, pausing to allow Amara to meet him on her own terms. The cubs quivered but did not flee. Instinct and recognition kept them grounded. A soft moan escaped Amar's throat, low and vibrating, an acknowledgement rather than a command. Amara lifted her head, ears rotating, nostrils flaring as she absorbed the familiar sound. She gave a subtle nod, the tiniest movement, signaling acceptance. Amar closed the final distance, chest brushing against hers, careful not to startle the cubs. The reunion was quiet, intimate, a dance of recognition and trust performed in near silence. Jamal's eyes followed every movement, noticing how Amar's gaze softened when a cub stumbled and how Amara's tail flicked protectively. The river whispered behind them, water lapping gently over stones, carrying the sounds of reunion into the fading sunlight. The cub's tiny paws pressed into the damp earth, exploring the world with tentative curiosity, guided by the scent and warmth of their parents. The pride's reactions were subtle but telling. One older lion lingered nearby, head tilted, observing the scene with an almost reverent patience. Another padded closer, sniffing the new cubs briefly before retreating into the shadows. No growls, no displays of dominance, only the quiet rhythm of acceptance. Amar moved among them, sniffing, nudging, allowing each cub to brush against him, imprinting their presence with gentle pressure. Jamal finally allowed himself a small, relieved smile. Life had returned to its fragile balance, and yet it felt more profound than any simple survival. The cub's tiny mews filled the space between splashing water and rustling leaves, a delicate soundtrack to the quiet miracle of reunion. Amar and Amara moved together, heads held high, protective yet calm, embodying the unspoken rules of the wild, the blend of strength, care, and instinct that ensured their legacy would endure. The sun dipped lower, painting the river in deep amber and soft violet shadows. The pride slowly began to settle along the bank, bodies curling into the earth, tails wrapped, ears twitching at distant sounds. Amar lingered near the cubs, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, eyes scanning the surroundings with quiet vigilance. The family was whole, yet every gesture, every pause, carried the weight of survival and the tenderness of bonds earned through trust. Jamal stood back, absorbing the scene with reverent quiet. No words could capture the intimacy of the moment, the way Amar's coat glinted wet gold, the way Amara's eyes softened when she watched her cubs explore, the way the river seemed to cradle them all in a protective rhythm. Eventually, he turned, letting the shadows envelop him, carrying the memory of the reunion like a secret treasure. The last light of the day faded behind the distant trees, leaving the riverbank bathed in a soft, gentle twilight. The pride rested, the cubs huddled close, and the river whispered their story into the world. a story of survival, courage, and the quiet miracle of returning home. The sky darkened abruptly, heavy clouds rolling across the savannah like a wall of shadow. Amar and Amara stiffened, sensing the change before a single rumble of thunder reached the riverbank. The cubs pressed close to their mother, trembling tiny paws against her flanks, ears flicking at every distant sound. Even the river seemed to hush, its gentle murmurs replaced by the low whistle of wind threading through the tall, rain-soaked grasses. Jamal stepped carefully along the muddy bank, observing every movement. Each lion reacted differently. The older members shifted uneasily, muscles coiled, ears rotating, eyes scanning the horizon for unseen threats. Amar paced near the cubs, head low, movements deliberate, body taut with restrained energy. The air was thick and electric, carrying the scent of wet earth and ozone, sharp with the promise of lightning. A blinding flash split the sky. Amar flattened his ears, muscles trembling with tension, while Amara growled low, drawing the cubs even closer. Their tiny cries rose and fell, delicate against the roar of the storm. The older lions formed a loose circle around the cubs, tails flicking, eyes wide and alert. The savannah had shifted into a realm of sudden danger, and instinct guided every motion with precise, unspoken understanding. Jamal remained still, kneeling in the mud, careful not to draw attention. He felt the static charge in the air, hairs standing on end, every breath heavy with electricity. The lionesses pressed close together, bodies slick with rain, creating a protective living wall around the cubs. Amar stayed at the forefront, nose to the wind, chest heaving, muscles rippling beneath his wet fur, each motion a promise of guardianship. Rain fell in thick sheets, striking the tall grasses with a hiss. Each drop carried the smell of earth, sharp and sweet, mingling with the musk of the pride. The cubs whimpered softly, tiny bodies pressed tightly to their mother. Amara swept her tongue over them in reassurance, her touch careful, deliberate, the rhythm of her movements calming and precise. Amar circled the perimeter, alert, allowing a cub to press against him, a silent vow that all would survive the storm. Lightning flashed again, closer, illuminating the riverbank in stark white. Shadows leapt across the lion's wet fur, highlighting every twitch of ear and flick of tail. Amar's eyes glimmered with measured intelligence. He did not panic. A low, controlled growl vibrated from his chest, blending with the thunder above, a warning to any approaching threat. The cubs sensed his calm and strength, and their trembling eased slightly despite the chaos around them. Hours passed in a rhythm of wind, rain, and distant thunder. The pride moved as one, instinct and experience guiding every step. Jamal absorbed every detail, Amar's wet mane clinging heavy and dark, Amara shifting gracefully to shield the cubs, tiny ones exploring the puddles under watchful eyes. Each gesture carried meaning, every pause a story of endurance, trust, and the raw beauty of the wild. Finally, the storm softened. Rain became mist, hanging low over the river, clinging to grasses and rocks. Patches of pale gold pierced the clouds as the sun pushed through. Amar shook himself, droplets spraying like molten jewels. Amara nudged the cubs toward him, tails curling in relief. The river resumed its gentle murmur, reflecting the last light in rippling gold. Jamal exhaled, feeling the tension drain. The pride had endured, stronger, bound closer by shared survival. The cubs nestled against their parents, bodies rising and falling in quiet rhythm. Amar lingered near them, alert but calm, while Amara carefully licked each cub clean, ensuring all were accounted for. The savannah seemed to exhale too, as if acknowledging the courage and patience that had carried these lives through. As the sun sank below the horizon, amber and violet spilling across the river, the pride settled for the evening. Jamal lingered, memorizing the scene, the wet glint of Amar's fur, Amara's tender nudges, cubs clinging to warmth and safety. Slowly, he turned and stepped back, shadows swallowing him, leaving the riverbank, the pride, and the fading storm in fragile, beautiful balance. The evening air was calm, carrying the faint scent of wet earth from the storm earlier. Amar stretched along the riverbank, muscles relaxing as the tension of the past days ebbed from his frame. The cubs nestled between him and Amara, tiny bodies rising and falling in a rhythm that matched the slow pulse of the river. Jamal remained hidden in the shadows, careful to let the moment breathe. The pride had settled, eyes half closed, tails coiling lazily in the damp grass. Amara licked each cub again, soft, deliberate strokes, as if imprinting her love and protection onto their fragile forms. The cubs responded with tiny purrs and gentle nuzzles, their trust growing with every careful touch. The forest beyond the river murmured quietly, the rustle of leaves blending with the river's soft gurgle. Amar raised his head, ears twitching at a distant call of another lion, then lowered it again, content. His eyes softened as they met Amar's, a silent communication passing between them, gratitude, relief, and the quiet joy of being whole again. The cubs began to stir, testing their strength. One tiny lion stumbled into the soft mud, prompting a low rumble of amusement from Amar. Amara nudged the cub back toward the warmth of their parents. The pride watched patiently, the older lions' bodies relaxed but alert, a subtle reminder that protection was constant even in moments of peace. The sun began its final descent, painting the savanna in streaks of amber and violet. The river reflected the colors like molten glass, and the wet grasses sparkled with droplets that caught the light. A soft breeze carried the scent of the earth and the faint aroma of the pride, creating a living tapestry of sight, sound, and smell. Jamal inhaled deeply, storing the scene in memory, the way the cub's fur glimmered, the gentle rise and fall of Amara's chest, Amar's patient watchfulness. One by one, the pride began to move slowly toward the cover of the forest. Amar lingered near the river, sniffing the air one last time before following. The cubs, now more confident, toddled behind, tails high, eyes wide with curiosity. Amara stayed close, guiding them with gentle nudges, her body a shield, her presence a constant source of comfort. Jamal stepped back fully, letting the forest absorb him. The riverbank was empty now except for the whisper of water over stones and the soft rustle of leaves. Yet the memory of the pride, the courage of Amar and Amara, and the delicate triumph of life remained. There was no need for words. The scene itself spoke of survival, trust, and the quiet miracle of family. As the last rays of sun disappeared behind distant hills, the cubs huddled together in a small clearing, tails entwined, eyes closing in safety. Amar and Amara lingered nearby, ears flicking at distant sounds, noses to the wind, ready to react but content in the moment. The savanna exhaled, leaving the pride in a peaceful, fragile balance. Jamal turned away, carrying the memory like a quiet treasure. The story of survival, patience, and gentle courage would remain with him forever, etched into his heart. Above, the sky deepened into violet and indigo, stars beginning to pierce the darkening canopy. Somewhere beyond the trees, life continued, resilient, patient, and beautiful. The river whispered its eternal song as the pride disappeared into the forest, a single, harmonious movement of life returning home. The night embraced them, soft and quiet, leaving behind only the golden memory of courage, love, and the unspoken bonds that had guided them through the storm.